just sacrificed 32 minutes to an individual that doesn't give a damn about anybody's time but hers.
On reality TV, have you ever witnessed a political showdown so dramatic that it could be compared to a train crash? Get your hats on, people, because we're about to explore the Wild West of Downton, Illinois. A season of your favorite scandalous show is coming up, and while Mayor Tiffany Henyard remained as dull, the tension was great because with their ideas and more than a little annoyance, the residents were ready to unload their frustration on Mayor Henyard. And Monday night's routine village board meeting was on the verge of becoming a full-fledged political protest due to allegations of power struggles and trauma.
Here to arrive, and we'll give another 5 minutes. Mayor Tiffany Henyard delayed the meeting.
The scheduled meeting started 30 minutes late because of what seemed to be a minor issue, but this seemingly insignificant delay served as the catalyst for a large wave of simmering resentment that swiftly erupted into overt hostility. Tensions reached a breaking point when a local resident who was taking the microphone made a direct and pointed remark that perfectly captured the atmosphere of the room. "We just gave up 32 minutes to someone who doesn't." The statement resonated with the gathering, causing a flood of collective annoyance that encouraged others to speak up, give a damn about anybody's time other than hers. As each participant took their turn at the microphone, their voices quivering with a mixture of sadness, despair, and mounting rage. They spoke with a tangible sense of resolve, as though they had all arrived at a moment of realization. Their complaints centered on a single rallying cry that grew stronger as the meeting went on, eventually making it impossible for even Mayor Tiffany Henyard, who appeared to be impervious, to ignore, as participants took turns speaking the refrain. Cleahouse 2025 changed from being a straightforward statement of discontent to a clear and unwavering directive that embodied the community's desire for radical change. Speaker after speaker repeated the passionate and urgent sentiment every contribution had, the sense of dissatisfaction and resolve in the room causing the crowd's energy to concentrate around a single objective. The meeting's focus changed from addressing normal issues to becoming a rallying cry for accountability and change after a leader they perceived as unfit and insensitive was removed. Gathering changed rapidly into a deep moment of one resident in particular who was very passionate about civic engagement, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation and urging their neighbors to understand the crucial role they played in deciding the town's future. They fervently declared that we must go to the polls and cast our votes wisely because we cannot allow her to continue being the mayor. This heartfelt plea struck a chord, and the audience erupted in cheers as their annoyance became a burning and unifying call for change. The air was charged with the intensity of long-suppressed concerns being finally expressed. It was not only a sense of exasperation, but also a renewed sense of resolve, as though the community had come to the conclusion that the status quo was unacceptable. Because of the unadulterated intensity of the crowd, it was inevitable that Hen's time was nearing its end, and that the time for action had come. The meeting was dominated by a crescendo of suppressed anger and searing frustration that represented a tipping point where years of discontent boiled over into a single act of action. As each speaker took the floor, the focus shifted from individual grievances to a collective movement to restore accountability and transparency in local governance, calling for action. The atmosphere in the room transcended its immediate context, symbolizing more than just local frustrations, and became the dominant theme as attendees encouraged their neighbors to rise above apathy and actively participate in the electoral process. What started as an unplanned forum to air grievances turned into a motivating force that illustrated a community that had reached its breaking point and was prepared to fight for meaningful change. Is a microcosm of a larger fight for accountability, demonstrating the strength of group discontent when it is used for a common purpose. As one fervent voice followed another, their unwavering resolve echoed throughout the room, uniting neighbors in a shared mission. After a 10-year period marked by mounting criticism and growing discontent, the meeting was now driven by a populace that was adamant about demanding better leadership, ending not as a typical civic occasion, but rather as the beginning of a movement propelled by the unwavering determination of a community bound together in their refusal to tolerate the unacceptable any longer.
Know this, I am going to come through on a landslide, just like Trump did. Know that.
The atmosphere was charged with frustration as residents took to the microphone to voice harsh accusations and unapologetic ultimatums against Mayor Tiffany Henyard, whose leadership had become a lightning rod for discontent. However, Henyard never backs Down from a fight, standing her ground with her signature defiance and unapologetic confidence, refusing to plant any seeds or show even the slightest hint of intimidation after meeting the residents' demands aimed her in a tone of disdain. Demonstrating that their criticisms of her did not in fact modify her approach in a harsh speech intended to both provoke and reinforce her position, Henyard utilized the altercation to reaffirm her authority. She said, "I have the seat now whether you like it or not. I am your mayor." Her remarks reverberated throughout the chamber, making it clear that she planned to maintain strict control. Her statement was delivered with the calculated, bold declaration, which was made by someone who was well aware of the backlash it would cause. It was not just a declaration, it was a challenge, daring her critics to defy her while solidifying her unwavering hold on the office. Rather than appeasing her detractors, it only served to increase their contempt. Henyard, however, was unfazed and continued to use her rhetoric, comparing herself to former President Donald Trump and drawing comparisons between their leadership styles and the scandals that seemed to follow them both in spite of a barrage of unjust criticism. She presented herself as a powerful and misunderstood leader, even hinting at a landslide in her own words. Victory presents herself as the victim of unrelenting criticism and a divisive character who defies hardship. In addition to serving as a defense, this narrative served as a rallying cry, positioning her as a leader standing up for her convictions in the face of growing public disapproval, and calls for her resignation was evidence of her fortitude and tenacity in refusing to give in to the demands of a vocal opposition. But for many in the room, it was the most recent development in a concerning pattern of behavior that demonstrated her increasing alienation from the community she claimed to serve. Her harsh and contemptuous tone made it clear that she was not prepared to respond to calls for accountability or recognize the discontent emanating from the crowd. Her remarks upset even some of her erstwhile admirers, who interpreted them as more proof of her refusal to accept responsibility for the scandals and errors that had plagued her term rather than as a show of strength. Henyard's inability to seriously respond to criticism signifies the end of a leader who was more concerned with securing her position of authority than with attending to the actual issues facing her citizens, despite the fact that it was startling her. Defiance was seen as a priority of her critics, saw her portrayal and control over the community's demands as signs of a bigger issue, with each act of disobedience appearing to strengthen her position as a leader more concerned with maintaining her power than promoting unity or open and respectful administration. The gap between the garden and the residents, who became more and more irritated with her unwillingness to react to their complaints or participate in a constructive way. Supporters of Henyard, however, noticed a distinct aspect of them. Her audacity and unrepentant attitude demonstrated that she was a leader who would not be intimidated by public opinion or the demands of public scrutiny. They saw her as someone who unjustly singled out someone who was under severe criticism for daring to lead in a different way. She painted herself as a historical figure by leaning into this perception, which resonated with a small but loud group of people who appreciated her tenacity and believed she was willing to stand alone if necessary to pursue her vision, whose contentious tenure would eventually be vindicated, much like others who had encountered fierce opposition during their time. But the attendees at the meeting demonstrated a growing understanding that her dismissive, confrontational, and uncompromised leadership style was untenable, as locals voiced their complaints. Because of her comments, that evening's acted as a reminder of the huge differences between Henyard and her town. Many people realized how, instead of calming or inspiring her audience, she seemed to widen the gap and reinforce the idea that she was a leader disconnected from the needs and worries of the community by cultivating a tense connection with the very people she was elected to represent.
Without bias, at the conclusion of this investigation, I will provide an assessment of the findings.
When a courageous resident faced Mayor Tiffany Henyard in a confrontation that embodied the town's long-simmering frustrations with firm resolve, saying, "We are downtrodden citizens, not your subjects or employees. And since you are departing with this resolute statement, you will not treat us this way any longer," the tension and anger erupted into a spectacle of raw emotion and political struggle. Their defiance ignited an explosive encounter that went beyond what constitutes a simple political dispute. Henyard words that were frequently dismissive of critics echoed through the packed room, but failed to intimidate a defiant audience. Her remarks prompted a firm rebuttal from one resolute citizen, which energized the crowd. The residents' passionate challenge electrified the gathering, sparking cheers and applause that signaled the crowd's solidarity and their collective decision to no longer tolerate what they perceive as the mayor's conceit and overreach. This moment served as both a daring challenge to Henyard's authority and a forceful declaration of the town's unwavering demand for respect and accountability. It also revealed the citizens' fervent desire to not be silenced or dismissed. This encounter was more than just a personal altercation. It was a sign of Dalton's mounting discontent with leadership that was seen as aloof and indifferent to the concerns of its residents, as Henyard is known for her signature. Defiance tried to hold on to her position of authority. The tension in the room was evident. Authority, but her remarks only served to confirm the audience's impression of a leader who was out of touch with the issues facing the community. The applause and cheers that greeted the resident remarks were a potent demonstration of the community's will. These residents were no longer willing to remain on the sidelines and were prepared to speak up in addition to reflecting political differences. This gathering showed how resilient democracy can be at its most grassroots level, as evidenced by Henyard's insistence on control, and the community's fervor in pushing back the confrontations demonstrated the strength of collective action, demonstrating that even in small towns, citizens' voices matter and can challenge even the most established leadership. The people of Dalton also reclaimed their position as the true bearers of authority in their town, not just protesting policies or leadership decisions. The exchange also brought attention to a more serious issue in Dalton, a town that was struggling with leadership it could no longer trust during Henyard's term, which was characterized by accusations of financial mismanagement, dismissive governance, and a withdrawal from the community. This has been a point of contention for criticism. It was the result of months or perhaps years of frustration, and the tension in this specific meeting was not an isolated incident. People fed up with broken promises and what they perceived to be a lack of confidence in the government used the forum as a platform to voice their displeasure and call for change. The heated exchange reflected a larger conflict in which a town came together to demand accountability and a leader who was stepping up her authority in the face of mounting opposition. It became clear that her defiance, rather than stifling dissent, simply served to strengthen her detractors. While her opponents saw her statements as a sign of her refusal to take responsibility, her supporters saw her defiance as a sign of resilience, and the tense atmosphere of the meeting room demonstrated the power of grassroots activism. Dalton citizens were no longer satisfied to be passive observers in their own governance, and this confrontation marked a turning point and a symbolic moment of empowerment for a community demanding to be heard. The people in the room were those who felt that the time had come for change, and as the confrontation progressed, it became evident that this was about more than just political differences. It was about a community's right to demand better, to challenge its leaders, and to hold them accountable. At that moment, Dalton's citizens sent a clear message that they would no longer put up with denial or dismissal, and that they were prepared to take control of their town's future, proving that even the smallest voices challenge established authority. Henyard was impacted by the town for a long time, being under FBI investigation. The conversation continued long after this particular meeting. By May 2024, administration inquiries regarding village spending further exacerbated public dissatisfaction. According to the report, former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightford also looked into Henyard financial operations and discovered a significant deficit in the village's general budget, with the town's general fund balance dropping from $5.61 million in 22 to $3.65 million. Lifefoots also expressed concerns about excessive use of the financial difficulties. Residents' concerns about an agenda that hasn't been fully investigated and the lack of transparency surrounding the township's finances only exacerbate. The village credit card is demonstrated by the number of purchases for which receipts were missing. An additional shocking finding was that 43,000 Americans bought items on Amazon on January 5, 2023. Henyard had been in charge of 2 trustees in the township, and the long-running conflict between Henyard and the trustees reached a climax when Christopher Gonzalez and a village spokeswoman ruled that Henyard's attempt to appoint Ronald Beer as the new police chief without board approval was illegal. Carmen Carlisle skipped a board meeting, which prevented a vote to choose a new trustee to take over the position. Gonzalez expressed concerns, asking why there was such a rush to get us to a meeting. He and Carr were worried about giving Henyard too much authority, especially when it came to financial matters. They feared a return to the questionable spending patterns of the previous lease after the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, which was accused of bankruptcy fraud at the time of his employment, even declared that Lacey lacked the necessary documentation and was not currently requalified to serve as a police chief. This further exacerbated the legal issues surrounding the former interim chief given Byrd's previous legal actions alleging political or employment retaliation. The board recommended in the letter that she remove him from public service until the necessary paperwork was filed and his eligibility was established. During the legal battles in relation to staffing, landlord Janetta Hall revealed that the couple had not paid rent since August, leading to thousands of U.S. dollars in late fees and back rent. However, Hall refuted this allegation after allowing Byrd SDR to act as temporary head for 30 days. The judge ultimately reversed a number of her rulings, even after Henyard's PR efforts to divert attention from the ongoing issues. Hall further asserted that Henyard and Wetz had changed the garage door code in the locks to prevent her from entering the property. The eviction case further demonstrated how precarious her situation was, although many people enjoyed the giveaway.